Application Security Weekly delivers interviews and news from the worlds of AppSec, DevOps, and all the other ways people find and fix software flaws. Join us as we explore how the latest news highlights modern security practices and reminds us of the missing ones. We also bring insights from interviews on topics from training to threat modeling, from open source tools to cloud-native techniques, plus an occasional reference from new wave to synthwave. Find us at securityweekly.com/subscribe or look for Application Security Weekly wherever you pick your podcasts.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I want to give a plug to Application Security Weekly. John and Mike are amazing, and they are joined by Akira, who is just an awesome person. Like, someone you just want to hang out with.
Yeah.
I love her so much.
It's a great show.
Yeah, and when she joins our regular calls and stuff, she's just amazing. So make sure you check that show out for sure. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day invitation-only executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our audience $100 off admission when you use the code SECWEEK23 to register. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more. Speaking of conferences, I will not be at RSA. Despite our previous announcement, I will not be at RSA. However, I will be presenting at B-Sides Charm in Baltimore, April 29th through the 30th, and delivering the keynote at RVASec in Richmond, Virginia on June 13th through the 14th. Hope to see all of you there. Alrighty, with that, I think we want to lead in, before we get to stories, with something we've had to do at least twice in the past, and that's admit that we got hacked, because it happens to everyone. Happened to us twice in the past, and recently happened to us. Now, the first thing you probably want to know is, well, why and how? The answer is very simple. Paul got lazy and sloppy. That's really all it boils down to.
That's always the answer.
It's always the answer of why everyone gets hacked, right?
Whenever I get hacked, I say it's because Paul got lazy and sloppy.
Someone got lazy and sloppy, man, and that was me. I got lazy and sloppy. I left firewall rules open that should not have been open. I was running SSH on a non-standard port. There was an account that had the password the same as the username. It can't get any more lazy and sloppy than that. I didn't work to reset that password. I didn't close down the firewall. I was running SSH on a non-standard port, which I think is the only thing that saved us for as long as it did. But I forgot that firewall rule was in. How many hacks, right? I forgot that if I left that. There was, circumstances.
Put that in there to fix something and forgot.
Put that in there to leave access open. There's no excuse for it whatsoever. Because since then, I'm pretty close to having everything locked down from the outside, nothing open, and using actually Tailscale for a VPN. Yeah, I could set up WireGuard myself and all that stuff, but I'm I got a lot of things to do, and I got systems to manage on top of it, so I'm Tailscale is free for 5 devices, I think. And that's one of them is set up as a network node, so that's really all I needed for this kind of small application. If it grows, I'm more than happy to give Tailscale some money. They don't sponsor the show. They sponsor a bunch of other podcasts, which is how I heard about them. So your marketing's working, and your product is pretty great. Sam.
Paul, I have to protest to this highly unprofessional way you're handling this. You need to blame this on an intern.
Yeah, no, I know. This is not how some people handle it, is they play the blame game, right? I practice extreme ownership. Man, it's me. And it's taken me a long time to get to that point, Sam. It's kind of, one of my friends had someone deliver a drink to me at an event we're at, and the guy, the server goes, well, I was told to give this to the man in the funny hat. I'm you know what? I own that. It's fine. It's good. I think previous Paul might have been what do you mean funny hat? Had a complex about it. I'm no, dude, I totally own it. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Same thing with this hack, man. I totally own it. It was now.
So take note, vendors. This is how you do a good breach disclosure. Take some responsibility.
I will say, fortunately for us, this was really friggin' lame hack, and lame is kind of a metaphor that I'm not sure quite fits. They did nothing to try and cover their tracks or be stealthy at all. So Tyler and I were I was able to figure out what they did. I was kind of surprised. I'm no, like I got a handle on this. Like there's no need to panic, anyone. Like because it is so like they did not try and be stealthy or use advanced tactics at all. Like, and then when I sent all the stuff to Tyler, he's like, yeah, I'm like, go find their infrastructure, dude. Like you're good at that. And he's like, yeah, that was like not that hard either. So they're not, they got, you know what? They need to come on the show and need to be like, look, you need to like go study some stuff, man. Like if you want to be like a really good attacker, you should at least try and delete the logs once you log in and like maybe figure out, had you looked, because I think it was an automated script that ran, modify your automated script to look and see if you have sudo access, because you had friggin' sudo access. And I panicked for a moment. I'm like, oh, but they didn't do anything with that. Like I have zero evidence to show they did anything to escalate privileges. Zero. Now the box gets automatically patched with I'll just say it with Automox, right? Is automatically patching on the Linux system. So I mean it's up to date. But like I fucked up and I left an account there, with easily guessable credentials. Now, all to their credit though, they're looking at non-standard SSH ports, and have a pretty good database of account, because it wasn't like root with a password of Tor. Like you couldn't log in as root remotely. But so
it was Big Daddy 69, wasn't it?
I'll give him, I'll give him a tiny bit of credit there. But other than that, the trigger was we couldn't log in with this particular account because the password had changed.
Oh yeah, I was here when that was going on.
And I was like, well, that's interesting. I'm like, so let me just go back through the logs and see all of the, so I was working backwards, unauthorized access attempt. I'm like, when was the last successful access attempt? I'm like, oh, I see that. I'm like, oh, and it's from an IP address that geolocates to Singapore. That's interesting. That's probably it. And all the other logs were there. All the other logs. And how did I find it? I don't remember how I found the initial infection. But the first thing just instinctively for me to check was, I'm like, all right, wait. Let me think about this. If they logged in with a regular user account, I'm like, what's the first thing I would do? What's the first thing you would do if you log in SSH to preserve access?
Create another account?
Close. Modify, add an entry to authorized keys in SSH.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me look there. I'm like, that entry looks suspicious. And it was a key, and then the name of the key was, I forget what the string was, but it was a specific string. Like, that's interesting. I'm like, what if I search on Google for authorized keys in this string? First hit on Google is someone that did forensics on this exact entire hack. Everything that he had in his post matched what I had on my system. He's like, look in this directory for this. And I go there. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's there. He's like, look at your cron tab entries for that. I'm like, oh, yeah. I'm like, that's there too. Imagine that. He's like, look for this running process. I'm like, oh, yep. That's there too. Look for this base 64 encoded blob and then decode it, and then it'll be a Perl encoded script that you have to decode. I'm like, oh, that's there too. Imagine that. I'm like, all right, no one panic. Like, we got this. We can clear. So close the firewall port, reset the password, remove all the files from the system and archive them. So I have them. Clean up the system, kill the running processes. I applied patches just as a precaution. It was a few minutes, but like the box is auto patched.
Set the server on fire.
Yeah, I mean,
threw it out a window.
I don't know. You could, Josh, but in this case, I'm really confident that we cleaned it up. Right? I didn't see any evidence of privilege escalation. I didn't see any the blog post from 3 years ago, mind you. The blog post had all it was matching artifact for artifact what I was finding on the system with some minor differences, but it was most of them. I'm like, kill the processes, get rid of the cron tabs, and I'm like, I cleaned it up and continuing to monitor, and all seems good now. So
let's be clear. Wait, let's be clear. What you're saying is that a 3-year-old hack process,
yes, got
you because for 5 minutes you were lazy and didn't do a couple of things you should have.
Yeah,
and
it was
you
probably,
know what you're. what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm not denigrating you or bitching you. I'm just saying, look, you were tired, you were lazy for 5 minutes. Big freaking deal.
Yeah, that 5 minutes to disable that firewall rule.
But I think in terms of the real world, I think that's a lesson.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson, I think that was Josh's point, is that the lesson is that all of us are going to eventually do that.
You're going to make a mistake.
So you definitely need to have good, incident response plans and know what you're going to do when this happens to you, because maybe somebody more sophisticated shows up, or maybe it's a 10-year-old.
Yeah, we got lucky, dude. Yeah,
it's a 10-year-old in Singapore who was scanning systems and said, "Ooh, look at this."
No, I think it's slightly.
Well, it's a little more than that. But I'm saying in this general model, it could be a 10-year-old from Singapore. It could be a nation-state attack group. But at the end of the day, you slip up for 5 minutes because you're tired, or because somebody called you right in the middle when you were doing something, and you just didn't get back to it.
There was no sensitive data on this system. They would have had to work pretty hard to get at any sensitive data. I'm not saying they couldn't access sensitive data, but I don't know the server would have given them any more access to any kind of sensitive data.
Well, I was just showing my students the other night an example from something I worked on a while ago, and these people were like, "We think these Uber hackers are after us. We're really nervous." And I went and looked at it, and the very first rule in their firewall, their ACL rule, was permit IP any.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, this rule right here pretty much lets everybody on Earth into this system. And he was like, how did that get there? And this one person in the room sort of sheepishly said, oh, we had that new system and it wasn't working, and I think I put that rule in just till we got it working, and I was going to take it out and I forgot. And it was very similar to what you're saying. It was just a momentary lapse, and then it slips through.
Oh, and there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse to have password authentication enabled in your SSH server either. So there's also that. But again, we get...
So change management would have helped with that any rule, just being clear on this.
It would.
Proper change management.
It is, and I completely agree. It's just not everybody has change management, and not everybody can afford change management. And this is a company that went from one employee running everything to 20 or 30 people in a period of 2 or 3 months. And
I found it interesting too that the malicious actors went through some effort to make sure there were no other crypto miners on the system.
Yeah, I don't want to compete.
Which requires a little bit of planning and coding. But had they used some of that planning and coding to be a little more stealthy?
Yeah, but some of those scripts do all that too. So they're just people that
they're just ripping off a script.
They ripped off a script. The script looks to make sure that the resources aren't getting sucked up by other crypto miners, because it's pretty common on compromised systems.
Right.
So they ran their script, which did all those things, and then planted their crypto miner.
It would have gone undetected for longer. It's difficult to theorize how much longer had they not changed the password.
Yeah.
Why use a password when you add a key?
It was exactly what I was just going to say, Tyler, right? Like, why?
That was why my answer to you was the first thing I would do is create another account, because then I get a key and I got an account that you don't know about, and I don't mess with your account. I'm just going to leave it alone, because then you're going to immediately notice the first time you try to log in. It's going to, what happened? Why does my password not work? I don't want you to notice. I want to be sitting there for years and be persistent.
I would rather just have one job that had a reverse connection that ran in memory. I don't flag or trigger any events, but that's me.
Yeah, no, agreed, Tyler. But now
they did a good job of setting their infrastructure up.
Yeah, I sent you the. I was like, I'm like, all right, I got it to a point where like I'm confident like we can just keep going, and I've cleaned it up enough that there's no like residual or additional risk, right? Like we're good until I can get back and like do some more cleanup, but like I'm like we're good. And that confidence is just experience with incident response too, right? Like a lot of other newer incident responders probably would have been like unplugging stuff and doing that stuff. I'm like, nah, I'm pretty sure like we're good.
Yeah.
But Tyler, that base 64, it was easy to decode the base 64. Where I was struggling because there was all kinds of like weird characters in that Perl unpack, and I'm like, I gotta go do a webcast. Like, like then I take my kids to soccer. Well, how did you get the Perl to unpack? That's where I didn't spend enough time.
I'm trying to remember. If I remember right, I think I found a nonce or a key in the config.
Mm-hmm.
Big R file. I don't remember.
Gotcha.
After I got the IP and I pivoted off the IP that they had, that's when it kind of shifted to a hunt forward operation.
Yes. So I passed it off to Tyler. And this is good in incident response. And not everyone has this luxury of Linux admin with incident response experience and threat hunter and threat intelligence expert. And Tyler, I passed it to Tyler. I'm like, dude, like in your spare time, can you just take down their infrastructure for me? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem, Paul.
Being able to email Tyler is like one of the greatest incident response tools I know of. So
like, just go make sure they don't do this to anyone else.
Yeah.
And so what did you find, Tyler? We haven't even synced up. This is like live on the air in incident response briefing.
There you go.
Yeah, I was able to pivot off of some very specific ways that they set their infrastructure up. So there's only 4 servers that have a open port banner, which is then hashed, and I run that against some net flow data, and I was able to find only 4 boxes on the internet, and I looked at the traffic for the last 30 days of those 4 boxes, and the open ports, all very familiar, 6667.
So they're using IRC as their command and control.
Correct, but there's a very specific, out of those 3 and 4 servers, one of those is very clearly the admin server that has 443 open as well as SSH. And now looking at the traffic, I can see which days they were attacking us and other people, and now we're pivoting on those pieces and seeing who else they've attacked, as well as seeing where they came from and accessing their stuff. So
it was,
and their stuff is over international lines in non-NATO or allied countries. So Bob is doing this from international waters on his boat.
There you go. It was a very nostalgic moment where in the same chat conversation with Tyler, talking about an incident, I used the terms Perl and IRC. Just want to point that out for our audience. That was weird.
Yeah, I had to double check that you said Perl.
Yeah.
And then I was...
You're like, what? I'm like, it gets better, Tyler. IRC.
Perl, IRC, and crypto miner. Okay, this is going to be fun.
So I think it was just a script that ran, because I didn't see any evidence that they cleaned anything up, but I didn't see anything in the bash history, and I'm assuming that I just don't have SSH logging configured well enough to be able to log the commands, because I'm assuming they ran the commands through SSH, which I'm not logging, which I now think that's a bad idea, that I need to scrutinize my SSH config across all the servers I manage and do a better job of
that. Or they kicked off SSH without logging enabled as part of the connection.
Right.
I'm guessing these guys, based on their infrastructure currently, are not doing that. So we'll go with you.
Yeah, I'm guessing they just got a bunch of tools from somewhere and started running them as well.
That's what it sounds like.
Kind of felt like to me.
But I think logging those SSH attempt connects is not a bad idea. And
I log the attempts, but if you run a command over SSH, I don't think it's configured to...
It doesn't record what they're doing by default.
Right.
So you'd have to actually add that.
I need some better tools to do that.
You kind of want to, well, if you don't have a lot of connects, so you don't have a lot of people using the SSH, it's not so bad to log what's done over SSH. So actually, what commands were executed.
Now I remember seeing an article about that. And I was like, I should do that. But back to Josh's point, like, I'm lazy, so I didn't do that.
It is a management problem, and like I say, if you have a lot of people using SSH, it gets a little overwhelming. But if it's something like these sort of static servers that are not getting access very often, or they're only being accessed by you, it's definitely a good idea to log when connects happen and what they did, because then you can go back and see that. And it's not a bad idea to cron those out either. So I like to cron them to ship them somewhere else so they can't delete them.
I think also important from the lessons learned, which include, SSH key-based authentication, VPNs, better logging and visibility. Nothing like an incident to kind of bring forth like, oh, I need to do some of that stuff better, right? Nothing like that to kind of kick off what you should be doing better from a security posture And I think centralized logging is something that I was sorely missing.
A log server is definitely a nice thing to have. And like I have Linux servers and they're pretty static. They don't do a lot. They're usually for student experiments or whatever, but some of them are outward facing. And when I had more outward facing ones, if somebody connected that by SSH, I got an email.
Yeah.
I mean, that was triggered. I mean, because it was so rare that if I saw an email pop that says somebody just connected to SSH, I wanted to know about it because that wasn't supposed to be going on. And so, again, if I'd had hundreds of people connecting to this stuff, that was not a good idea. But because it was so static and it was so rare, it was a really good alert for me. And I'm like, uh-oh, and I could immediately jump on there and hope they haven't already wiped my server or something. But I used to have a lot of fighting with some groups that didn't like me, the Schwarzaferde guys.
And you hope you're not one of the incidents going on like 3CX where you don't even know you have an incident.
Well, absolutely.
Researchers letting you know that you have an incident.
Yeah. But I mean, to be fair, those kind of elaborate incidents like that are rarer than these kind of just opportunistic strikes.
No,
and I you have to balance your risk versus your return. I mean, I'm lazy too. I'm lazier than Paul by far. When I come in and I'm standing around smoking and drinking, Paul's working. And but I mean,
Paul's work is smoking and drinking.
Part of it.
But I do think that you need to do some of that kind of stuff. I think central logging is a good idea and so forth. So you have to do it, but I try not to get too rabbit holey about all the stuff I read every week, and I'm going, oh my God, because my server has to run, it has to be functional, and there's only so many hours in a day. And I have gone down that road before where I was sitting there like 20 straight hours going, is he back? Is he back? Is he back? And blacklisting people and all this stuff. And you're just like, okay, I got to quit doing this. But so the esoterica is cool, and I hope I'm blocking it with patches and whatnot, but I'm more worried about this opportunistic crap where it's just, oops, I left a hole open, and it wasn't some elaborate deep dive 0-day thing. It was just something stupid I did, because that every time I've ever been hacked, that's what it was. It was exactly like this. I just left a hole, and it was stupid, and it was me being lazy, and I forgot I did something, or I didn't secure something properly, and I got popped. And then I had to swing into action and do incident response, and
Well, I think that's the point, though, is that no network and set of systems you set up is impenetrable, and part of your strategy has to be,
I'm going to get hit.
What do I do if I get hit? What is my plan?
It's just like driving. I mean, a lot of people believe they're amazing drivers, and maybe some of them are.
Sure.
And but I don't care how good of a driver you are. It doesn't help if somebody just suddenly changes lanes and hits you. You can be the best driver in the whole world. If somebody just does something unusual, boom, you get hit. And so you can't go through life as a server administrator or a network administrator under the assumption, I'm a really good network administrator and I'm a really good cybersecurity professional. I will never get hit, because you will get hit. I mean, someday. So you better have that in your head and in your plan, because if you're supporting a live action network that's supporting many, many users, unlike me, who I can just go turn it off and go, okay, guys, look, nobody do their assignments today. I'll get this back up by tomorrow. But if I'm supporting 100,000 users, I can't do that. So you better have a plan, and you better be ready to swing into action. And you may not be able to email Tyler. So, I mean, some of us have that good fortune, but not everybody does. Well, you can, but you better send a check. So,
but
I'll get that to you, Tyler, real soon. I'm going to mail that tomorrow.
It's also,
I'll pick it up with you when I see you.
Yes, send the bill to CRA Post Office Box
0420.
Things could, in this case, certainly could have been much worse as well. When you consider this is like a gaming motherboard, and the firmware on this gaming motherboard, I know because I monitor with Eclipsium, is pretty horrible. And I'm like, if they were a sophisticated bunch, I'd be in trouble, except I run Eclipsium on it. So if they mess with the firmware, I would know, because it sends me an alert if the UEFI firmware changes. So it kind of would have been screwed in that.
This makes another really good point, though, what you just said, and I think we should point this out. It is also very easy to focus on things you are interested in.
Yes,
like Paul loves firmware, And so he focuses on, but you get an alert on his firmware if it changes. Not many people have that kind of thing. So
if you mess with the firmware, I would know.
And so a lot of people, a lot of system administrators, network administrators, you have things you like a lot.
Yeah.
And you focus on those things and do those things, but try to break that box a little bit and make sure you're thinking about other avenues and other constructs, because you do tend to get in that little bubble.
Well, wait, let me go back to the beginning where I said we should blame it on someone else. What I meant to say instead of this whole thing is that this was a honeypot, hoping that people would try.
There you go, the old honeypot excuse. Yeah, I was trying to attract hackers.
I was trying to attract them and see if they would mess with the firmware.
And the whole thing.
Oh boy,
so we've all used that one.
It's exciting when something gets hacked around here because we get to talk about it. I'm like, good, this is great content.
I mean, we almost should have some honeypots.
We got hacked. I get excited. Like, Tyler can do his thing. We can talk about it on the show. I'm like, this is great.
Well, yeah, it is fun when it's something that isn't mission critical. And like I said, I used to fight those shorts.
No. This system was mission critical.
No, I know.
Just throw it out there.
But you weren't
This was a mission critical system.
You weren't supporting 100,000 worldwide users, and now you're down for 6 weeks.
I should qualify that. Mission critical, but not directly tied to revenue kind of thing. You know, I mean, there's different levels of mission.
My stuff was important too. It just wasn't like I'm supporting 100,000 customers.
Yeah,
it was like I can tell the students, guess what? We got hacked. Come look. I'm going to do a demonstration of it and explain what happened tonight. Yeah. And I can fix this tomorrow, and it's not the end of the world, and it's not costing us money. And yeah,
let's talk about hacking. Let's talk about hacking garage doors. I've seen this article presented in a couple of different ways, and one of them is like, oh, well, hackers can open your garage door, and I'm like, yeah. Ooh. I have a Flipper 02, and if it's the right garage door that doesn't use rolling codes, that's a really easy thing to do. In fact, if I were to listen on certain frequencies and wait for my neighbors to open their garage door, I could get said frequency, and then I could open their garage doors. Not that I would ever do that. I mean, Bob might do that, but I would never do anything like that. Right?
But this isn't that use case.
This use case is different. This is, and this is where I kind of took issue with, I think it was Dan Gooden, Ars Technica, right? I kind of took issue with the title. It was like an open garage doors. Okay, well, first of all, as I established, I just gave you a use case. And you even need a Flipper 0. There's lots of other hardware available to do this kind of thing. Josh and Tyler Wright could probably tell you at least 3 different devices that they probably have 2 out of the 3 within arm's reach that can intercept signals for garage doors. Okay, if Larry was here, he'd pull one out of his pocket and be like, "Oh, like this." This was. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, this is not just limited to garage doors. This manufacturer, who will not remain nameless, is Nex Devices, NEXX Devices. It was also to control all of your other Nex devices. So this was also part of a home security system.
Right.
So through similar vulnerabilities, an attacker could disarm your home security system, open your garage door, and I think there was one other use case that they had. It might have been doorbells, light switches, cameras, some kind of smart stuff like that all either had the same vulnerability or similar vulnerabilities. And the advice is immediately unplug all your Nex devices. The company was not available for contact. They didn't respond. So Nex, quoted from the article, Nex has consistently ignored communication attempts from myself, the Department of Homeland Security, and the media. His recommendation, device owners should immediately unplug all Nex devices and create support tickets with the company, requesting them to remediate the issue. There's an estimated 40,000 of these devices out there, estimating
this is just
20,000 individuals.
And it's using a universal password to communicate with all the devices to the back-end cloud server as part of MQTT protocol. That's just
right.
There's a lot of things. This is all hardware flashed at the firmware level, and you can't change this on your in device.
And it gives back PII.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like this is just like, oh, look, it keeps getting deeper. Shit, dig faster.
Mhm.
It's probably why they didn't reply.
Could be. Or these are architectural issues.
Yep.
Yeah, this is so MQTT and the subscriber model where you're sending a single message to a cloud that's brokering that to individual devices and passing that across the chain. You can't fix that unless you're actually built that into the firmware and the programming language for the device to do the communication up to the cloud broker. That queuing for the MQTT is that's fundamentally broken, especially if you're using a hard coded password in there.
Yep.
That's universal across all the devices. So not just individual computers for one customer. This is all customers. So you could essentially probably spam an API endpoint at that cloud and cause a bunch of garage doors to open.
Hold on. Even if you did stuff like have a good password on your account for Next and enable two-factor authentication, and you had someone that was good at firewall management, like not me, but someone that was good at firewall management doing the security at your perimeter, you'd still be vulnerable to this because it involves them querying the
coming
server
from the cloud,
and those commands get sent.
So it's a very ICS-y kind of problem.
Well, it's IoT.
No, I know, but I mean, this is a very similar kind of problem you see in a lot of ICS OT problems or IIoT stuff because it has the same problem because they built it with the idea nobody would ever be able to get to it, and then they moved it all to the cloud, and so suddenly there's these hard-coded passwords that are on the chips, and you can't really change that stuff very easy.
Yeah, device to cloud broker is integrated into the firmware communication protocol, and then the whole web app and the API and the application the user uses connecting it to their internet and their user account. That's all separate from the MQTT communication to the cloud broker.
But the IoT device itself initiates a connection back out to the cloud to check in periodically. To see if there's any new commands or whatever, because I was doing investigation at another time where I thought we were hacked, but we weren't, and I saw all of this outbound traffic going to AWS. I'm like, what is that?
Yep.
It was the Ring doorbell.
We've all gone through
because it was constantly sending. I think it was UDP. Was it UDP packets? It might have been UDP packets. It was constant like stream of UDP packets. So the packet count was really high, and it was going to AWS on an IP address that I didn't recognize as a workstation or server because it turns out it was the Ring device, that was doing.
Well, yeah, when we bought a new house, and it doesn't have one of these garage doors, but it has another kind of garage door, and that thing's got. And I did the same thing. I connected everything, and I was looking at stuff trying to connect to my Wi-Fi, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I was like, "The garage door." So I connected it, and boom, the thing goes crazy talking to some server somewhere, probably in China, and it's like got a whole back end app and all this stuff, and I'm like, "Why do you need?" Okay. But you can rig it to send you alerts if the garage door opens, so you can grab the assault shotgun and head to the garage if somebody's breaking in.
Well, yeah, I find
why the ability to open a garage door if you're not nearby. Why would anybody want that?
Well, I mean, it could be to let someone in remotely, in which case you could have a smart lock or whatever, which is equally as horrible security. But locks, whether they're garage door or your front door, the use case to your question, Sam, is I can let someone in remotely. Someone's at my house and they need to get in for
well, yeah,
something,
for instance, this one I had, one of the things that kept popping up was it was like allow Amazon drivers to open your garage door so they can put the packages in your garage, and I was like, no, I don't think so.
Oh, well, no, Amazon had a thing where they could do that without you initiating it.
No, that's what I mean. It was like you give them this code and the driver can pull up and open the garage of your house.
Yeah, I hate that.
And I was like, and you guys use all those wacky aftermarket gig people who are driving old beater cars that, I don't think so. I'm not letting them open I don't even want the guy in the UPS truck opening my garage door. I just put the package outside. It's fine.
Yeah. I keep a camera in my garage. Because typically, like privacy-wise, it's different from putting a camera in your bathroom or bedroom than putting a camera in your garage, right? Like
that's what I did wrong.
Most of us are not standing naked in our. Well,
I'm
taking
not
account
commenting
the
on
whole
that at all.
Hey. No kink shaming.
No judging.
kink
That's
shaming.
right. No judging. If I wanna do routing in my garage with a board naked, I'm gonna do it.
Well, I mean, you're also streaming it to OnlyFans when you do that, so I guess.
Well, I
the
mean,
ring
I don't know how
camera
you make a
Doug,
living,
Doug.
but I know what I got to do. It's like some of us have to work for a living.
Naked
He does have to
woodworking
live
with
on
Doug.
Doug has
Like,
to
if
live
you
on a
mean routing
professional-
as in like BGP routing,
No.
that's one thing, and you're just a little weird for doing it naked. If you're talking routing like using a router on a piece of wood, Jesus Christ, man, if you do that naked, you're asking for
My
Yeah,
whole
in the most
show is
awkward
about
places.
routing pine boards with nude pine board
Yeah, be
routing.
very careful routing your wood naked.
You better have some Neosporin handy. That's all I'm saying.
Then just go cook some bacon naked, okay? Come on.
That's my other. That's my
the
other
equivalent
OnlyFans show.
Wow, that got off the rails really quickly.
It often does.
So,
Lee,
so I'm just shaking my head here because I'm sure there are a ton of folks who have one form or another way of putting their garage door open or online, because the IoT remote is simply another remote that you pair with your garage door or doors, plural. And I'm sure the security is all over the map.
Yeah.
one thing though that, and this is kind of always my argument to people say, "Oh, IoT bad, security is bad," but if it's I mean, I think it would have to have this regardless of the whatever manufacturer you get it from. When I did a smart garage door in my house, which I've since disconnected, but there was a tilt sensor on the door. And the tilt sensor, I believe, was a very basic sensor, Zigbee or Z-Wave, and it had hardware in it, right, where there was like something inside of it that would move around. So when the door was down, the gravity would pull down something inside this sensor, and it would say the door is down. If I lifted the door up, that sensor, the thing inside the sensor would move.
Like a mercury tilt
and,
switch.
Yeah, and indicate that the garage door is up. And I liked that because, and now I'm thinking I should do this again, because before I go to bed, I try and have this checklist of my IoT stuff in my house. Like, one thing I do is I make sure all my lights are off except for certain lights, right? And then, like, I have schedules and all that stuff, but like I kind of double check. Like, I can click a button on Philips Hue, for example, and go turn off the whole house, right? Like, done, all the lights are off, except for like some spotlights on the front, because I don't like it to be totally black. But one of the things I like is I can look and say, is the garage door open? Like, that's always like our fear. Like, did I shut the garage? Is it open? But with the tilt sensor, it would be able to tell. And that's also how the smart device for the garage door it knows the state of the garage door. Otherwise, how would it know if it's open or closed without a tilt sensor, unless it was something smart connected to your
The one Lou and I built was just literally, it was an actuator.
Yeah.
And when the door went all the way up, it just pushed. I took a fiberglass rod that was like that people use for like snow stakes and stuff.
Yeah.
And we cut it. And when the door opened all the way, it pushed the rod, pushed the actuator, and now this was really low key. I ran a wire, and it turned a light bulb on.
There you go.
It was just literally like a light bulb in his room in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And if that LED light was on, it meant the garage was up, and that way he knew he'd left the garage door open, and he could go down there and close it.
But that increases your security.
Yeah.
If you buy a Next device, not so much.
Well, it increases one kind of security and decreases another one.
Right.
Because, some 10-year-old kid's going to open your garage door from Singapore.
True. Josh, you're on mute.
Bloody hell, thank you. Front Point, the alarm system has garage door sensors that work like that. They have a tilt switch in them.
Yeah.
And you attach it to it's wireless, so you attach it to your garage door, and boom, it'll tell you if it's up or down. Of course, Front Point has its own problems. It's Z-Wave, and that has issues, but those kinds of things are out there.
Oh, while we're on the topic of IoT, we should talk about TP-Link.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
My story number 6.
Which one?
My story
6.
number 6, and I'm basing this solely on the exploit code. And
Not on 14.
What's that?
Not 14.
14 is a different one. Totally different one. So TP-Link, my story number 6, is a TLWR902AC firmware, has an authenticated vulnerability, a remote code execution vulnerability, but the vulnerability is the lack of signature checking on the firmware for the device. And what they did is, did they use binwalk in the thing? I think they even used binwalk in the thing. They basically download the firmware from the device. They use some utility to break it like you would do in reverse engineering. They break it apart. They get the root file system. They copy a version of netcat to the root file system. They put the firmware back together, and then they upload the firmware back to the device.
Wait, I think that's the same thing as the AX1800, the other story. Is it
a similar thing?
I happened to buy 2 of these while on vacation, and I've seen it, and I'm like, what the shit? Like, literally, I just got these. And that's the same thing that they're doing for that one. I believe the improper validation of the length of the firmware image and the ability to do remote code execution from copying that fixed length stack buffer into the image, you end up getting root as part of the execution.
It's just crazy. Like, I was looking at exploit code, like, oh, they're doing like firmware reverse engineering on the fly to exploit a vulnerability. And then I went to my story number 14, which is a TP-Link AX1800. And that one was from Zero Day Initiative. And they haven't published the exploit, but they published this sentence. The specific flaw exists within the parsing of firmware images. The issue results from the lack of proper validation of the length of user-supplied data prior to copying it to a fixed length stack buffer. Probably enough for many out there to go reverse engineer the firmware and figure out where that is. Like, that's all most of us need to go, okay.
That's pretty straight. That's pretty damn straightforward.
It's straightforward. And it kind of gives you an indication of even where to look inside of the firmware and binaries. Gives you enough that folks that we know that do firmware reversing all the time, it wouldn't take them very long at all. If I gave this the researchers at Eclipsium, we'd have an exploit really fast for that. And many other companies. I mean, this is, again, that was the takeaway for me on my story number 14, Tyler, was like, folks are going to figure that out. They've done it with less, actually, and more complicated, more well secured. Like, they've done it with Android in both directions, right? Like, Maddie has done it from a description of a malware kit, figured out which bug they were exploiting, and malicious actors have done it based on a description of a patch or whatever, right? So
yeah, that's way more complicated.
IoT just seems to be still like the squishy center. Like, talk about the hard and crunchy outside and squishy center. Like, it's the squishy center.
I'd call it the squishy cesspool. It's really bad.
Still today, just because it's not the only one.
Yeah, you got like what you have. Story number 3 is like Home Assistant, which I have been looking at a little bit. Very interesting.
I've been looking at. I started a thing on Home Assistant and didn't finish it, which probably sounds familiar to many of us on the show, many of us listening, right? Because I wanted to convert. I'm like, Home Assistant seems like what I need to be migrating to for my smart. I've already told you I got smart stuff in my home, which smart stuff is really the wrong way to. It's an oxymoron. in that smart IoT devices.
Yeah, it's definitely an oxymoron.
But what I hate, and it's like a love-hate relationship with the voice assistant, which we also have a story about as well. But the voice assistant, because myself and my family love and hate also. Like, when it doesn't understand you, you hate it. When it does understand you, it's a nice convenience to issue a voice command and turn lights on and off. Primarily, that's what the 2 use cases, I think. We have all this fancy assistants. I guarantee you 90% of the use cases are to turn lights on and off and play music. Yeah, kind of like the clapper. Yeah, right. Those older folks that remember the clapper. But so I'm like, I really want to get away from, like, I hated the Amazon Echo ecosystem. I find it really creepy. So I have Google infrastructure, which is probably equally as creepy, but doesn't feel as creepy to me. But it's probably equally
like Vincent Price versus Christopher Lee.
Yeah, dude, it's still creepy, right?
It's still creepy, just in a different way.
So I'm like, I really need to do this home assistant, because I also hate having a bunch of apps. I hated SmartThings was good for a while, and then Samsung totally screwed it up.
Yeah.
And so now I'm just using like individual apps to control some of my stuff. And I've got some smart light switches. Ironically enough, Kazaa is TP-Link, right? That's TP-Link, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Kaz is TP-Link. So that's probably really
I got rid of all that. When we bought this house, the people that had it before, she was giving me this whole book on how to do all this stuff. And, she's like, if you do this, if you'll set this up on your phone, when you pull in the driveway, you can just say lights and all the grounds light up and the house lights up and all this. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll just turn the lights on when I get there.
Yeah, it's interesting. So
it's cool stuff, and I love playing with it.
Yes.
But I also scared to death of it because, we were literally testing some of those devices and saying weird things we never said at home. And, like sexy. I'm just kidding. Sorry, honey. But, we were just saying things and like ads were popping up immediately. And I'm like, this is crazy. I'm getting like camo lingerie on my site because I said that last night. And this is so strange.
Doug, you asked for that for your birthday. Come on.
No, I was legitimately asking for it. I just didn't expect it to pop on my screen. I was like,
Oh, okay.
Hey, Sheila, I'd like some camo lingerie and thongs for my birthday, please. And I didn't know it was going to pop up on my Facebook feed. Jesus.
I'll be emailing your wife in just a few minutes. Anyway.
She's well aware.
So where were we? We were talking about
camo lingerie and thongs. I mean, what more could we want?
Right. We got like a ton of stories on exactly what we're talking about, and I've lost track of where
you were. You were on the home assistant stories.
Oh,
I was going to troll Tyler with my number 9.
Well, hold on. We want to do that, but I want to get through Simple Nomad's post on delving into Home Assistant, right? So we use Debian and SystemD in the same sentence, which I'm like, Mark, dude, I could have told you like that was going to be a bad experience. And Mark is implementing Home Assistant and kind of giving a tutorial, which is a great post, and you should definitely read that. Like, I love the posts where, and Mark does a great job of this, as well as many others, where they're just talking about, like, I took on this project of any magnitude, and here was my experience, from start to finish. Here's where my assumptions, here's where that went wrong, here's how I did this or that, here's why I chose the technology. I love that stuff, and it's not necessarily security related, but it kind of is. And so, yeah, he had to build a Debian system to run Home Assistant. Well, that's the path that he chose. And it's interesting how we choose this technology based on a number of different factors. Security being one of them. And so, Home Assistant is something I want to come back to. I do want to get my whole house back, onto a Home Assistant platform. I just got to carve out the time to do it. But then,
if you talk about Home Assistants, you have to talk about Sam's story number 3.
Oh, I didn't see Sam's stories yet.
Look at Sam's. The Google exec says Nest owners should probably warn their guests that their conversations are being recorded for any smart device like Nest or Echo.
That's
hold on. Does that mean? No, I don't have. I have Nest in the studio, not at home. Does that mean the Nest is listening to all of your conversations?
It's got a microphone. Yes.
Do all models have microphones, or certain models after a certain point?
That I don't know.
All of them, I think, because they do it to see if there's a human in the house to turn the temperature up.
Yep.
You can set them that if there's somebody there, like the motion sensors for lights, if there's somebody there, it turns the lights on. If there's somebody there, it heats or cools.
Well, yeah, they have motion sensors. I don't know if they have microphones.
Yeah, they have.
What do you think is the cheapest motion sensor?
Yeah, I know they have a motion sensor, but I'm not sure they have a microphone.
No. What is the cheapest motion sensor? Is a microphone.
Oh, does that work? I mean, what if I walk really quiet? I mean, I don't.
You're still breathing. You're still breathing.
Okay, no, that's a microphone.
Hear you breathing.
I'm here, honey.
Yeah, I mean, most of the Nests have infrared or heat motion microphone, and even some of them have cameras built into them.
All right, I got to go home and tear those damn things out now.
I just see what it sees. It's always interesting to see what
Camo lingerie and thongs.
Well, mine don't communicate. I got them blocked. They're on their own private network, and it doesn't go anywhere.
But it can still transmit out to the internet.
No, it cannot.
Oh.
Not mine.
Oh, so you've just turned them into regular thermostats.
Yeah, I didn't want them. They were already in the house, but I'm like, okay, I'm not going to replace all these things. But yeah, I immediately realized that, they were like wanting to talk to the internet. And I'm like, I don't want these things talking to the internet. So
this brings up the trope. This brings up the trope of, what's the difference between a tech enthusiast and a technologist?
Yeah.
The tech enthusiast has screens everywhere, smart devices in hanging off the walls like bunches of grapes. A technologist has a printer and a bat in case the printer starts talking.
Smart grapes, though.
Yeah.
I like a printer
Tyler,
and a bat.
How many smart devices, Tyler, do you have in your house?
In the lab or in my actual house?
In your actual house. Lab is different.
None. After testing Alexa in live production on my family, that came out pretty quickly. Moved to Google, and we'll say that was just not intuitive and did not work how I expected it should work. So
it doesn't work. It doesn't. You know what's? It's interesting that Google will recognize my voice, but not my wife's.
That's a setting, but it also once you add children and or family accounts and or try and cast between different devices, say iOS and Android, nothing works. Just the whole ecosystem is stupid. We're gonna say it used to be.
Yeah. No. Agreed. It
might be interesting if we all answer that question. I have no smart devices anywhere. I wonder how many do you guys have?
I've pared it down. Go ahead.
I have smart lighting. I have some of the smart lighting products, but I have we control them with our phones.
Yeah. Is it Hue?
You don't have
the Hue one?
No, not the Hue.
I have the Hue. Why have you hacked the Hue? You turn lights on.
The Hue. I mean, the Hue doesn't work with anything else. Like that protocol and the way they've done that, even with very descriptive documentation from them, does not integrate with Google, with Home Assistant, with any of them. Like they're one of the bane of my existence. From my lab standpoint, I won't put those anywhere just because they suck so bad.
Yeah, we use the Nanoleaf. They're pretty good. They're expensive, but they're pretty good. They have they integrate with HomeKit. They integrate with a lot of different stuff, but we don't use any of that. We use the native Nanoleaf apps on our phone to just control it. Basically, honestly, most of that is for night lights for the kids.
Yeah.
I think the smartest thing I have is a Roku, honestly, and I set that up so my wife could use her phone as a remote because we lose the remote a lot. That is terrible.
The Roku has the button on it. Tyler, the Roku has a button on it that'll make the remote tone off, right?
No, I did not. Well, so I don't have it's a smart TV with Roku in it, but
it's funny you say that. I was programming a universal remote because my son lost his remote last night, and it's a USB that plugs into the TV and communicates with the remote, except for the infrared power on, power off. And so I used my Flipper Zero to find I had the Unleashed firmware with the pack on it. And I was like, nice. That's the code for this TV. And I programmed the universal remote from my Flipper because it could transmit
using
the right
Flipper
code.
for good. Look at that.
Using it for good.
But actually, we use Apple TVs because they don't sell your data at all. Roku, Jesus, the amount of traffic from Roku
I hate
out
Roku.
to the internet. God.
I went NVIDIA Shield, but I'm sure that Google's still monetizing my data somehow because it's Android.
Yeah.
You log on the Google account.
So I just have Apple TVs everywhere, and I don't let the TVs talk to the internet. The one TV that my wife had to let talk to the internet for a few minutes for some reason, it will. I need to go in there and just factory reset the damn thing. It drives me nuts. It's horrible.
Wait, how do you stream if it doesn't have access to the internet, Josh?
The Apple TV does. The TV itself.
Oh, the TV itself doesn't. I wish they would just sell TVs that were just giant monitors.
Because I don't like giant monitors.
That, don't you?
all the Samsung models are smart in some capacity. Now
Just buy a monitor.
you cannot connect them to. Yeah, I mean you could just buy
buy a giant monitor.
Do they make a 75-inch monitor?
Of course they do. Sure they do.
Doug's old. Of course they make one for him.
Yeah, they have them at school.
They're just
Samsung. We have
expensive.
Samsung monitors that are like massive, crazy that they donated that they just use for like putting the name of building on or something.
Right.
Do you know how expensive they are? That's the
Yes.
thing.
Oh yeah, they're
The
crazy
TVs,
expensive.
The TVs are
cheap.
because they want to monitor. They want to monitor
they're
with the
selling it
camera
all,
and
baby.
sell the data, and they monetize the apps because you can't remove some of the apps because they're permanently installed on there. I mean, unless you want to start reverse engineering the firmware and hacking every single TV.
That's why I
I
use a
just put an
Gen 2
Apple TV in
TV.
front of it.
You just Raspberry
what?
Pi.
A Raspberry Pi
apps.
TV. There you go.
I mean, you could
Code it yourself.
It's a lot of work, though.
It's a
It
lot.
comes
of work.
back to I'm lazy.
Just that. So am I. I bought Apple TVs. They don't sell your data. It's that simple. You bought the 4K Apple TVs, put them all over the damn house, and said, "I'm done. I don't have to deal with this." The problem is, however, the Apple TV remotes are annoyingly small, so they get lost instantly. Luckily, with an iPhone or an iPad, you can use that as the remote.
Can you use
You
Android?
just can't have an Android in the house and try to do anything with the Apple TV.
Yeah.
Then you got to find the remote.
Yep. It all
But
sucks. I really hate these ecosystems. This two phone ecosystem with shitty ass IoT devices and TVs just is lending itself to a miserable security existence that is less convenient, and I'm happy not having some of the stuff in there, honestly.
I respect that.
Give
My
you a
wife,
different scenario. My local cable TV provider, Sparklight, has said, we're getting out of the cable box business. Everybody's going to have to stream to their TVs. And it'll work with Apple TV, Kindle Fire, or Google / Android TV. No Roku.
wait. So your cable company is not going to do cable TV anymore. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
right. And it's better than that. The same package of services will cost you more because they're going to charge $12 a month to maintain the app which is written by TiVo.
Oh, interesting. TiVo's surviving somehow.
See, I wouldn't touch Sparklight service anyway, Lee. Just get you some YouTube TV and it hooks into all your shit.
Oh, and
Get your good old-fashioned YouTube TV with Peacock and HBO and Hulu and your Amazon Prime, and you're paying double what you used to pay for cable.
well,
Do you remember that broadcast TV used to be free?
Yeah, and the bonus with that is you're not only paying double for cable, you still have to watch commercials. Yeah,
That's
I love
the part
that.
I'm mad about.
That's just
there's in the cable there's two annoying charges that won't change. One is there's a $25 surcharge for broadcast TV now, and the second one there's another $9 charge for sports, whether you have sports packages or not.
it's all a sham.
Oh my God!
It's weird.
I would.
Oh, but back to voice assistant.
Yeah.
There's two voice assistant things I want to cover. One is my story number 4. This is the new attack. Near-Ultrasound Inaudible Trojan exploits vulnerabilities in a smart device microphones and voice assistants to silently and remotely access smartphones and home devices. It works by modulating voice commands into near-ultrasound inaudible signals so that humans can't hear them, but the voice assistant will still respond to them. I don't know if that's so much a vulnerability as it just is an exploit.
It's just an exploit.
Yeah, how would you fix that?
You'd have to narrow down the microphone, frequency range,
Right.
so that it couldn't
I
hear.
wonder how much that would impact the usability of it, though.
I don't think it would, because you can't speak at inaudible frequencies either.
You can't speak in inaudible frequency. That was my question.
Well, at least I can't.
Some people could. You'd have to try. Okay, I got
You could probably train yourself, and who would know if you were doing it or not?
I don't know, but I don't know that. I don't know if our vocal cords produce sounds that are inaudible to our ears?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, right?
But I don't know that.
100%?
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Yeah.
Well, it really ought to be trained to recognize your voice and not accept another human's voice even, because that's an obvious security vulnerability.
That's true.
My voice is my passport. Please verify. Is
Right.
that, yeah. Okay. Have we not gotten to that point, or is it?
It seems doable to me that you could limit the, I mean, obviously you can do the voice response, and yeah, absolutely. I think there's plenty of tools you can train to do voice detection, but it seems to me like there's no reason you couldn't limit the frequency response on that microphone.
But like if my fingers are wet, my fingerprint sensor doesn't work. So
I mean there's always kind of limits to
that.
it, but there's no reason you couldn't narrow down the frequency spectrum on that microphone. I mean, it would just cost more money because they'd have to do that.
Right. Or they're they're transmitting ultrasonic frequencies to communicate to all.
You mean them straight into the fillings in your teeth?
We're going to be overtaken by machines.
That's why I can't stop listening to I Love Lucy all night.
I mean, you go back to like even the early 60s or 70s, and you look at some of the technologies we were employing against the Russians, or the Russians were employing against the embassy in Moscow. They're a very, very accurate listening posts, and the ability to beam high and low frequency microwave right at a building and get the attenuation off of changes inside of transistors and receivers, and pick up digital and analog voice and typewriter and digital communication on the wire, all from passive collection. So you can look at some of the government stuff we've done. We have the ability to do some very, very finite and creative means of filtering noise and or collecting data from that noise passively and actively.
And if you stand in just the right spot in the embassy, you can cook a hot dog while you're standing there.
A bunch of people got cancer back then from that, right? You look at the late 60s, there were, they called it MUTs, Moscow unidentified transmission signals, I think. Yeah, MUTs, and there was another one where it was constant microwave, and it would pick up a frequency or variation in return frequency, and it would tune itself very quickly, and then listen at that frequency for the return attenuations off of different transmitters or transceivers.
But also in this article, they talked about you can use one device's speaker to attack another device's microphone,
right?
Which I thought was interesting as well.
Well, it's the same exact technology, though. I mean, it's just like they did two experiments.
However you generate
one experiment, they're using your iPhone and its speaker to attack its microphone,
right? And
the other one, they were using your iPhone to send a signal to some other device in your house that could hear the same thing, because they can all apparently hear these like supersonic.
Well, not all. It said iPhone.
No, it only
6,
worked on the
iPhone 6 Plus wasn't vulnerable to either attack, likely because it uses a low gain amplifier, while more recent iPhones tested use a high gain amplifier.
Yep.
I'm almost positive we discussed this in theory and at technical length when we talked about this. I would say 2 or maybe even 4 years ago, and the use of that for C2 mesh networks, very similar kind of how Apple AirTags would work, but inaudibly and bounce from device to device until you got to your home beacon.
Huh. It's cool stuff. I mean, it's very interesting.
Very academic.
Well, yeah, and they made no bones about it that this was an academic article. They were just testing this in a lab, so it's not clear how effective this would be in some kind of actual real world attack. And on most of the devices, they couldn't lower the volume. So if you started talking to one of the devices, the device might say, okay, and then you're sitting there going, why is my phone talking? And the messages had to be less than like 77 milliseconds long, because that was some kind of like limit on it. And so the one that they did was they had 2 messages. The first message said lower volume 6% to 6%, and the other one said open the door. That was the lab experiment they were doing. So, and then that did not work on Google. It didn't work on some of the other devices. It just worked on the iPhone. But the other devices, they were able to say open the door, and it opened the door, even though you couldn't, that the human couldn't hear coming out. But the phone was going, okay, I'm opening the door, Dave. Kind of stuff.
It's all academic.
Pod Bay door.
Tel Aviv.
I thought we weren't supposed to open the pod bay doors. We weren't allowed to open the pod bay doors, I should say.
I don't know. It depends on what kind of mood Hal's in.
True.
Sorry, Dave.
A lot interesting we're talking about audio and stuff. My story number 8, Nicholas Stark, who we interviewed on Eclipsium Below the Surface podcast number 7, made a post this week and said, well, the title of the post was, I love the title, Grub2, Music with Grub2. I'll let that sink in. Bootloaders do amazing things. Apparently, they can also play music. So Nick says, I decided to use an emulated version of Grub2 in order to effectively capture the audio out without having to use a microphone. This post will describe how I went about setting up Grub2 virtual instance, how I then generated some appropriately formatted numbers to achieve a semi-musical expression.
Who has time for this? What in the hell?
Apparently Nick does.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, that is something.
Well, no, he's into audio musical stuff, like digital music creation is his hobby. We talked about that on the podcast. Ironically, Scott Shefferman Shaggy's also into DJing and music too, so they were kind of nerding out. I don't know how much it was on the air versus off the air. It was a mixture of both, but they were nerding out about this stuff, so I wasn't surprised to see this come out from Nick. Which is pretty cool. I mean, my laptop's not connected, nor is the audio on, but
I would strongly recommend not playing that in headphones at high volume because that bloody well hurts.
Sorry. That.
Ow.
Wow.
Sounds brought to you by Bootloader Audio.
Sounds like 8-bit video game music.
It sounds exactly like 8-bit video game music.
Now, if you only had a receiver with inside the room that's on an air gap system that hears that, opens and initiates a firmware update, and then loads your payload stage via UFEI Intel ME.
Just tying all the things together.
Mm.
At ultrasonic frequencies.
There you go.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't have to hear the 8-bit music. It'd just be playing in the background.
My story number 11, while we're on the topic, keep in mind the author is only 14 years old. The title is Alexa, what is my Wi-Fi password? I don't know about you guys, but I struggled to get the big takeaway from this one. However, I think the research was absolutely amazing. It just wasn't framed or contextualized for exactly how an attacker would use it. But again, I don't fault the author being 14. The technical skills are absolutely amazing.
And research is research. Not everything has to lead to an exploit or a vulnerability. So research can just be for research purposes, and it's amazing that somebody who's 14 years old is doing this kind of stuff.
So some of the I'll try and walk you through this. So some of the Amazon Echo devices use now Fire OS as their operating system. There is an exploit called A-Monet, for lack of a better pronunciation, A-Monet, which was attacking Fire OS devices. He modified that to attack the Echo device. They had to make some modifications to the hardware. So this is a physical attack. And I liked the picture where he shows the internals and using did he say tin foil? I think he said tin foil.
He said tin foil.
He did say tin foil and was shorting that to disrupt the boot process. Is that why he was shorting that?
Yes.
Which anytime you say tin foil and shorting something, disrupt the boot, you got my attention. This is really awesome.
Let the magic smoke out.
Let the magic smoke. He did have some magic smoke. He did say he bricked one, which I was proud. I'm like, you earned your stripes there, bricking a device. But he did gain access to some of the firmware, and basically the keys for the Wi-Fi network were stored in plain text. And there are some other API keys in there for Spotify ZeroConf and other things as well. So
they
really,
have to be plain text, right?
Yeah.
How else could it connect using them?
So what are you using an HSM or a TPM to store API keys on a consumer IoT device? Probably not.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it should,
I mean, you could encode them, but
I was going to say a JWT token. Why wouldn't it do authorization on the server side and leverage like a cookie or a token that has a timeout period that then gets refreshed via the user app, like a lot of things?
Because that takes time and money and effort, Tyler, right? It's way easier to store it in plain text.
I mean, you're not wrong.
And I mean, honestly, that was the way people coded things forever and ever and ever. And I think that mental, approach just stuck. I mean, everybody
Back
did
in my day, we all used Telnet.
Well, I mean, and all your database code that you wrote like a long time ago, you hard coded the credentials because that was how the database connected to your C program or your COBOL program or your RPG program or whatever. And when you need to retrieve data from a database, you had to put the password in the code. That's just how it worked. And there was no encryption. And you could have written an algorithm to encrypt it, but there was no way to do that on the database backend. So you just did it. So it persists because that's just how people have always done it. And that's that engineering thing we were talking about in the first segment. It just gets in your head that that's how you do it. And then when an engineer's designing this stuff, they're like, well, who's going to access this?
Right? I mean, you hang
Mr.
servers,
Spock's not going to be out
servers out on the internet, and you leave easily guessable passwords.
Who's going to do
the
it?
worst that's going to happen is some script kid is going to put some crypto mining software on your stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
That's never going to happen.
Oh, never mind.
yeah. Well, I fixed Doug's problem. I got rid of the password on that account, so his stored password won't work anymore.
Just use a blank password. Back in the day.
I mean, that's what I did.
Anyone can log into your...
That was your primary database approach, was to put a blank password in for your code access.
Let anyone R-log in.
Well, yeah, if you had a remote server, you R-log into it, of course.
Totally fine.
How else could you do it?
Could go wrong. You're just giving everyone a free shell account.
Wrong?
That's what it was. I was just giving people a free shell account.
Yeah. I mean, it was good of you. You could probably write that off your taxes.
That's right.
You are helping people learn.
That's right.
That's right. It's making the world a better place.
Free and open.
Well, you're going to have... Wait till you get Tyler's bill.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm always worried about. I just say, hey, Tyler. I'm like, oh, no, can I afford this?
Oh, so we talked about my theme of why bother, which was, I thought, pretty funny. Where do we leave off with why bother? Why bother with updating your firmware? Why bother? Because HP says that the printer firmware... Now, the article says there's no patch available. HP says they're going to produce a patch in 60 or 90 days, which is totally fine. Also, this only affects HP printers running IPsec. I mean, show of hands. How many people have HP printers running IPsec? I mean, I can't see the listeners' hands, but I'd really... What? I want like a poll on this.
I've seen that setting. I have yet to do that. I've wondered.
Yeah,
Is that a VPN connection up to their cloud? I know they have this online printing. I don't know
what it's for.
Well, I mean, I was wondering because they have an online printing service.
It's probably not to them because then you'd have to do a key exchange.
No, it goes to a cloud, and I've seen it. I set this up for somebody else. I don't know if it was using IPsec, but I bet it was. So you connect a printer to the HP cloud, and that meant an employee who wanted to print could send the print job from their phone or from a laptop, and it goes to this server that's at HP or somewhere, or maybe some 10-year-old kid in Guangdong, I don't know, but then the print job comes back down out of the cloud to the printer, so it would almost make sense that if the printer was using IPsec type VPN between the printer and the cloud, that would make sense why it might be using IPsec.
And I'm sure that works great, and the printer probably still says...
printer.
Yeah, the printer still says it's out of ink or out of paper when it's ready.
Well, the new ones actually can order their own ink. You can tell them just order ink whenever you feel like it. Mine's all the time saying, please enable the automatic ink refill service so that we can provide you with ink whenever the ink gets low. I'm like, no, I think I can take care of that. Thank you very much. I don't need you calling daddy with the ink truck.
Put your credit card here in clear text. It's okay.
Yeah.
But so HP recommends to remediate this vulnerability that you revert to an earlier version of firmware and downgrade devices to that firmware version. So are we more secure if we don't upgrade firmware? Are we more secure if we downgrade firmware?
In this case, apparently you're better off.
Somebody here worked for a company that knew firmware.
Yeah, if only.
Well, I know, and that person says this is not the only case where manufacturers have recommended to downgrade your firmware to be more secure. It happens.
Well, yeah, if it's got a vulnerability in it.
I'm confused how. I mean, I get it, but I'm confused at how you manage that. Like, how do you go as an IT department?
We're unpatching, boys.
You are unpatching. Like trust us. Older software is better. Older software is better.
Well,
but you're failing your
bugs,
vulnerability
yeah.
scan. No, we're not. We're passing with flying colors. We're better off on the older version. Has less vulnerabilities than the newer version. How do you quantify this? It just shatters.
Better
all.
yet, how do you make sure that the printer isn't set to auto update it back to the broken version?
Oh God. Thank you, Lee. Thank you. You're wonderful. I hate you.
There's all kinds of weirdness with that too.
Don't let the printer talk to Daddy on the cordless phone. Just take care of it yourself. And yeah, I guess if you have to unpatch it, for me anyway, if I'm auditing you, if you've had to unpatch because of guidance, be sure you include that guidance with your plan and just say we had to go to this version. But yeah, that just sounds bad. Like, why not fix
Why do I have this vision of little spidery arms coming out of a printer and dialing a rotary phone and putting it on an audio coupler?
Help me! Help me! Only it would be ultrasonic. Help me! My vocal cords are trying. I'm making the sound and you just can't hear it.
Oh, right.
Dogs are screeching.
That's right. Dogs are howling outside here in Warwick, Rhode Island.
Well, thanks to Josh's prompting, I'm now flashing back to the mainframes we used to have that would actually, the AMDOL would call AMDOL if it detected a problem on the phone and schedule a service call.
Right. Our Honeywells did that. They would just, if they threw a certain error, they would immediately use the acoustic coupler to dial the engineer and say, get down here.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Okay. I got two more why bothers. Why bother having a password? I mean, why bother?
Somebody's just going to break it. Might as well be blank.
I mean, if you have an A10PE 8108 PDU, power distribution unit, you may have a vulnerability. This vulnerability allows an attacker to read configuration, including passwords for SNMP and Telnet, without authentication. These credentials can be abused in further attack steps. For example, switching off infrastructure that is powered by the PDU. I mean, why have a password if you're just going to give it to people? Think about that.
That's right.
That's essentially what's happening.
I mean, you know the studies where they actually bought passwords for chocolate bars, right?
Yes.
Why have a password if you're just going to sell it for a chocolate bar? Because I get a chocolate bar, idiot.
Well, there is that.
In this case, you get an opportunity to turn off someone's server, and that's a lot of fun sometimes.
It is. Just doing a shutdown command over our login can be quite amusing and satisfying.
I got one more why bother. You ready?
Okay.
My story number 17. Why bother signing things? Why bother? This is a 10-year-old Windows bug that has an opt-in fix. So when a signed executable is modified, Windows could or should, not quite sure, display a message stating that the digital signature of the object did not verify. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, that's how it's supposed to work. Right?
Yes.
Like the whole purpose of a signature is that the thing that you sign changes, it should be an invalid signature. Like that's the whole reason we do that.
Exactly.
Right? However,
that's right at the top of the XKCD article on the thing. Yeah.
However, CVE 2013-3900 goes, no, you can, if you modify that, totally fine. Signature should totally be valid. I'm like, what? So what? Why do we have signatures?
That's not appropriate. If you modify what you have signed, the signature should no longer work. It should be that, like that's.
But it just prints a message that says "did not verify." Click OK to proceed.
Is technically intact with this. So when you're talking about the Windows Authenticode signature format, right? Like the binary and the executed installed code, where the Win certificate structure lives. That is the Win certificate structure, and the additional data being tacked onto that is usually for extra information or added switches or arguments, right? Something
yeah,
like
the example. So the example they gave, Tyler, is when you tell Google Chrome that you don't want to opt into data sharing.
Correct.
For troubleshooting, like if it crashes, you don't want to send crash reports. That gets appended to this data, and that varies depending on what option you choose. By the way, after doing the show for 18 years and covering stories, I always say no because there's been just I don't know, just reasons. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So this has existed for quite a while, and this is usually appended data, and this all comes about. We'll cover this probably for our next story. This is all part of the 3CX VoIP phone breach and compromise. But this particular one, there was question around one of the DLLs with inside of the package that was signed. So the signing cert was still valid for the Windows signing cert on a DLL. Now the MSI package itself was still signed by the company. So there's still some discrepancy here around this, because the signing cert for the added DLL and some of the functionality within inside of the executable, the build pipeline on the company was definitely compromised. However, they did leverage this CVE, and there's other actors that are actively leveraging this. Zloader, the Zloader malware leverages this, as does others, to make sure that the signing cert for these binaries is just adding the additional data. So something like a side-loading attack, the DLL all zipped up into a package, the zip package or the MSI, either one, shows that the package is still signed. And once you extract that, you can actually end up with the binary that's signed and the DLL that's not signed, but the side load still happens once the installation happens or the binary runs.
Because of this 10-year-old CVE, it would still run.
It would still run. Once the DLL is extracted, it does not show that it is still signed. However, this particular attack is a little bit different. This is leveraging the WinCert structure, and it is appended data for the DLL payload that's using a sideload attack. You can actually change this with inside of your registry, and this is a well-known thing. Windows has opted to not do this because a lot of companies leverage this as part of appended data. It's typically not a payload or staging error.
Because Microsoft leans towards not breaking things versus having things be more secure. Just throwing that out there.
However, if you've moved to 11, another good note is this is not patched, even if you patched before and you've migrated. So it definitely goes back to that setting.
But hold on. Say that again, Tyler.
So when you migrate or update to Windows 11.
Oh, Windows 11, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, this actually reverts itself and goes back to the default state.
Windows 11 wants to be less secure and more functional.
Correct. And that is usually not the case for most things, but again, you could go fix this in the registry, add a GPO for fixing this.
And then when you update to Windows 11, go fix it again.
Correct.
Just checking. I really hope we can still have people from Microsoft on the show because we love you. We're just
100%. The CERT team would hop on and I'm sure talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, I like to throw jabs, but I don't hold any ill will. I'm not trying to make Microsoft look bad. I'm just this is.
I mean, honestly, they're doing a great job and they're very quick. Like some of their telemetry, Windows will get an instant push for Defender, and you'll have a signature in there that blocked this before it even went public. So
I mean, I just wish that Microsoft would lean more towards breaking shit, but it being more secure. Because we can go back to secure boot and baton drop and things like that. Like I want people to be more protected. But maybe assume some operational disaster as a result. And I'm like, okay, but you're more secure.
I mean, look at OneNote. One of your stories is on by default, Microsoft's now blocking OneNote and dangerous embedded files with inside of OneNote. So the mark of the web was removed. And most of the ransomware loaders were now moving to OneNote or sending Word docs with malicious macros inside of OneNote, and that would get over the mark of the web or filtering by a lot of spam filters and or EDRs. So they've now put that in, so the extensions are blocked and moved to a more secure default of not allowing embedded malicious files inside of OneNote.
I will say this, that in defense of Microsoft, that they've got a lot of hard decisions to make. And while Microsoft, I love you, and a poke fun and I'll poke the stick sometimes, but I do it because I love you, and I want everyone to be more secure. I want us to be in a more secure state. Again, on the flip side of that, I understand there's a lot of factors that go into these decisions, and you can't just willy-nilly go start making changes that impact thousands, hundreds of thousands of users without careful consideration. So, like, I get it. There's a lot of burden that falls on Microsoft, and it's easy for me to poke the stick, but it's a lot harder to be in a position of responsibility to do the right thing at the right time for the right people in the right situation.
Well, I mean, there's a good example of the losing the compatibility but it's been a while. But remember, you probably don't remember when Solaris 2.0 was first introduced, and it was definitely not backwards compatible with Solaris 1. Sun took a lot of crap from that, and they had to fix that. Not a good place to be in, and that's just that's less widespread than Windows is. But I do want to get back to that extensions. That's my story 11. But it's an interesting scenario. Just as Tyler said, not allowing the executables, although your 365 administrator can modify what's allowed. But they're rolling it out slowly, though. It won't be everywhere until January. But still, they're moving away from macros, yay! But now you got to block the other stuff. It's whack-a-mole, right?
Yep. Well, but also it does leave some of the responsibility to the administrators as well. In both these cases, administrators have control as to how you want to dial it in, right? But you got to take the time to go do that, to test it, to roll it out slow. Like it's work, and it's not work that Microsoft is making any less or more or less difficult for you. It's work based on your environment. If you've got 5 users, it's a lot less work. If you've got 100,000 users, it's a lot more work, and that's not Microsoft's fault. More people want to use their software. Like, that's good for Microsoft. You could be
super granular with GPOs and say we only allow file z.exe to run on the whole network, or and I mean you can and that's just back to basic security. It's a lot easier just to say we don't block anything. I permit IP any.
It's a lot easier to say
than it is to go in and say which
hang
files,
that SSH server out to the internet.
But I mean, attackers are going to come at you with every possible approach to this to get people to click on this file. And that OneNote thing was just such a nightmare because I could easily see people clicking it because I even had people contacting me about these things and saying, I got this email, it's got this file, it says, it's my 1099 form. I am expecting a 1099 form, but when I went to open it, it says click here to view. Should I click it? And I'm like, hell no. You don't know what that is. Contact the person who sent it to you and directly and ask them if they sent it. And then they were like, oh, yeah, maybe I should do that.
Maybe I shouldn't have clicked that.
Yeah, well, I had one of those too where he's like, what if I already clicked it? Then I'm like, okay, first you need to get a giant magnet and a flamethrower. So, and then I gave him Tyler's email address.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is number one provider of giant magnets and flamethrowers in the West. So
I like me some new malware.
So the Microsoft change is not unlike the change they made a couple weeks ago, where if you had a non-secure on-premise Exchange server, you could no longer talk to their Exchange Online servers, which I thought was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was like, hey, look, folks, patch this crap. Jeez.
Get with the program. And I still think people need to really consider, if they're running Exchange on-premise, why they aren't running it in the cloud.
Yeah.
It's becoming such a whack-a-mole to keep those damn things secure. It's got to be eating up resources like nobody's business.
Except for, now I'm giving everything to some cloud somewhere, and I'm going to have to trust that they're going to, secure it, and they're not going to steal all the data, and they're not going to monetize it somehow. I do like holding on to my iron. I
get it.
I know I get it too, and I completely agree with you, Lee.
Is that like a euphemism, or
yeah,
never mind.
It definitely was.
Definitely was.
But I completely agree with you, and I think the statement is valid. I just know that it's tough to get me to give up my big iron, and I've got that server I can lay my hands on. and
Your big iron.
Yeah, and I can stroke my big iron.
Look, what's are they pets or are they cows?
Uh-huh.
And which what level of care and feeding do you have? And it's everybody's got to decide for themselves. To be honest.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, the cloud makes perfect sense. It makes a lot of sense for this Exchange stuff. It's being updated automatically. It's getting patched automatically. It's being patched instantaneously. When they release the patch, I don't have to worry about installing it. But when I've got that server right there tucked away in my little server room, and I know where it is, and I if something goes wrong with it, I can touch it. I don't have to call some Yahoo and talk to a robot for 4 hours before I actually can get something done. Because I hate when they're like, please call and open a ticket. I'm like, I'm opening a ticket with a flamethrower and a giant magnet.
I'm still not sure if you can actually deploy Exchange currently in a secure fashion with inside of Active Directory. We'll say that, like a standalone with a single user.
Does Microsoft even let you buy it?
Yeah,
you can get 2016 still, I believe, but the way in which it deploys in Active Directory, you've got the shared permission model. There's so many misconfigured permission sets that allow escalation across the Active Directory domain that you literally just can't secure it or it breaks.
Yeah.
So you end up with a really real big kind of cat or chicken and egg issue.
You end up with a honeypot. That's what you end up with is a honeypot.
Well, I think it's sundowning. So I think Lee has a valid point. Is if you're not in the cloud with this and you want to use this, it's probably time to start thinking about
We've
your
been saying
path
that for a long time. Lee, you've got a story about 3CX as well, and I think you're harping on something we didn't talk about last week, and that was their handling of the incident. I don't want to even say their initial response, right? Is that what you wanted to talk about?
So basically, they got a report from Sentinel-1 that they had a problem, and for whatever reason, they went over to virus.
No, it was a customer. It was a customer. A customer said, "I have Sentinel-1, and it's telling you there's malware inside of 3CX, right?"
Even
they
before
discounted that because VirusTotal said no, and which is not how VirusTotal really is intended to be used. And then when CrowdStrike said something, then they're like, "Oh, okay," which I'm thinking.
Well, initially,
that customer who reported it's got to feel like crap now.
Well, but they told the initial customers that, that's got to be an issue with your EDR provider. You should go talk to your EDR provider about that.
It was even worse than that. Like there was guidance happening on their forums live where we were trying to get them to pay attention to this. Paulo started detecting it right out of the gate. They started whitelisting and making exceptions. And just telling everybody it's false positives, making exceptions in all of their applications.
That's what they told them. So you go to your software provider and you're like, my EDR says there's malware in your latest update, and they're like, well, you should just whitelist it in your EDR software. Oh, what?
No.
And so all the providers were rushing to kind of get the IOCs out of it, tearing the binary, pulling down the infrastructure, looking at C2. We were passing intel to them very quickly, and they were not interpreting it correctly, unfortunately. And they thought it was a supply chain issue with an FFmpeg DLL, because that's what it was named. So they thought that repository and an open source library had been compromised that they built into their package. Even though we told them that was not the case, they continued down that path. Finally, the CEO came out and said, okay, we've got an issue. They paid attention. They secured Mandiant's IR firm to come in and do it. But what ended up happening was there's both a Mac and a Windows binary that ended up with signed DLL or DMG that loads a malicious DLL. The second stage or final stage was with inside of GitHub in icon files. And so it would decrypt sideload the DLL. The loader would then decrypt the base64 and go check into a given set of domains that then provided the GitHub icon library where there was a payload in there in an encrypted string, and that would then load.
So wait, it had nothing to do with FFmpeg.
Cool.
I just want to be clear. FFmpeg was in no way, shape, or form the victim of any kind of attack or supply chain attack.
Nope, not at all. Nope. And so the 3CX desktop app, which is a, let's see, it was an Electron app, I believe. They told everybody just, move off of that, go to the web client for now, which was decent advice to get going. But by then, everybody had already ran and become a victim. So my buddy Silas actually created, as we're doing the IOCs and doing this real time and trying to help this company, he built a quick page that's, because we call this Smooth Operator. The My Operator website, or Check My Operator, allows you to go and check and see if you were a victim and downloaded the payload. So very high fidelity intelligence there, as far as, we could see how many customers downloaded it, who would access the GitHub, who would hit the websites via flow. There was some great work done by Sophos, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Orange Cyber Defense. There was a lot of people managing this very, very quickly prior to it even coming public. So they got very lucky.
My question is, was it an auto update process that pushed out this update? Because if you have an Electron app, conceivably it can auto update. I think Discord.
It can do both. It was actually both, because it was the auto update pushed it, and it was built in the DLL. Their development side had to have been compromised for the side loading and the DMG signing for the Mac OS payload. So that auto update, or the manual update of several versions all the way back to December 2022 is what we were thinking the actor was doing, or the infrastructure was stood up and beginning to kind of do this. They may have been compromised way prior to that. We're not sure yet.
But now,
we'll see if that
my question is, though, if you're an enterprise IT team, do you rely on the software applications auto update process, or do you assume more work and responsibility and go, when there's an update, I want to bring it down into a controlled environment, make sure the update's good, and then push it out and turn off auto update on my application software? That's a tricky, man. I get both sides of that.
So from this standpoint, like, what would you gain from not doing the auto update? Like, if you went and downloaded it manually, the one that was there manually for several versions was still infected. If you pulled it down and ran it in a controlled environment that had no IOCs, this was stealthy enough that it didn't trigger any AV, the application still worked, and there was very little differences from a.
But wait till how did SentinelOne catch it initially?
I believe it pinged on one of the domains that was flagged for GPRK.
That was what it was. Yeah, it was. It hit a domain.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with Tyler. I don't see that there's any real. I mean, I don't think you would have caught this. I mean, even if you had a very sophisticated updating process, it's not showing up. It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
So,
well, also the elephant in the room is, if you give your users the ability to install software, they can go to the internet and apply this update themselves.
Yes.
And that's a slippery slope.
But to me, this is software users should not be installing. I mean, this is not a Word. This is a PBX to manage, telephones on site. So this is not something that people ought to be just installing. It ought to be a very controlled piece of software.
Yeah, and
I mean, that's how I always treated it. I mean, I've managed a couple of PBXs here and there, and that was something that only a very few people had access to. Not even for security reasons. It was just like, why would anybody have access to this? I mean, you can change. I mean,
the software is probably installed in the image, right? And then the update happens because it's a soft phone desktop app.
Yeah,
works
right.
And I mean, that should be part of your deep frozen image or whatever that's going on the machines. You wouldn't want users installing soft phones and things. Although I will say the pandemic changed a lot of rules, and people are calling into the help desk going, okay, I need this so I can get calls at home. And they're like, yeah, just install this. Go to this website and install this software. So, yeah, you may be right. It may not have been an image in this case, because I know people were running all kinds of crazy stuff on their kids' machines and everything. I mean, we had students calling in and saying, I can't, I've got to use my little brother's laptop because I don't have a computer at home. I use the ones in the library. What should I do? And, you're like, But
I guess I'm out of touch, and I'm curious across enterprises how tightly controlled the restrictions are for allowing users to install software and or update software. I'm sure that's a mixed bag.
Yeah,
right?
it's a mixed bag.
Does it vary greatly, Tyler?
All
You've got
place.
more insight than I do, certainly.
Yeah, local administrator is still
Common.
even, I'll say it's probably 50-50 still. Like most places still have local admin, or they give people the admin account. If they've separated it, great. Users still install stuff. A lot of times they'll give them the application installer right. So, does it help anything?
And
No.
I mean, I think the pandemic.
But here's a
drove
user
that.
trying to do the right thing. I mean, conceivably,
Well, and
you're trying to do the right
option
thing. Hey, I want to make sure my software is up to date. But right there's your problem. If there's a supply chain,
Well, you need to
issue.
rein that back in. I mean, if you reeled it out during the pandemic and said, "Oh, we're going to give everybody a local administrator," it's time to reel that back in and put it back in your solid image.
There's a counter argument, Doug.
Okay.
I mean, I was talking to a guy. He had a process where users could ask for admin privileges when they needed it, with the idea being only certain tasks people would need admin locally. And the need was growing, and he said, I went through all our records. Not once did we ever deny local admin.
That's true.
So why am I asking the question?
And I agree with that. We used to see that in audit, and it was something we flagged. And when they said, "Oh, there's a process," we were like, "Okay, that's fine then." And then, I think you're right. I think it's like they never turn you down if you put the request in. So then what's the point?
Yeah. But I didn't say it's right to click yes for everybody. I'm just saying
But that's
there's
process.
But this is a place you could rein in. I mean, I think that this local admin stuff has got out of hand, and it gets out of hand very easily. And when the help desk is lighting up and people are calling in saying, "I need this, I need that," and it's like, how many people do you have to put on it? And the next thing you know, it's just like the Wild West.
But even then, you look at how applications are installed and running. Like when you, as an admin, install that as an image, and you do that under a privileged account, even when the user logs in, the exe runs as a user, but the update process and the application where it's installed has the ability to update itself because it's leveraging system or elevated credential as part of the installation.
Yep.
So that's how most apps run. And again, this one with the auto update wouldn't have mattered. This is a pretty sophisticated. Okay, this was a semi-sophisticated adversary and supply chain attack. There's a lot of questions here that many of us are still arguing on that worked on the incident. DPRK, there's some very clear keys used that they've used before. There's some other indicators of infrastructure they've used before. So there's a bunch of stuff that indicates DPRK. However, there was some sloppy mistakes.
Hold on. What's DPRK?
North Korea.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So yes. So there was a ton of things that point to them. We've kind of got some attribution. However, at the end of the day, all they did with this sophisticated supply chain attack, they made some mistakes. They didn't finish loading some stuff.
Wait, were they mining cryptocurrency?
Yeah, well, it was stealers, info stealers out of the browser.
Would it be safe to say, Tyler, that in this case that nobody was going to detect this because it's well hidden? So if I was managing this with GPOs, even if I had a really nice lockdown environment and an update comes out and I push this with GPOs, so I don't even let them have local admin, I push it, I probably wouldn't have seen this either, even in my testing process.
No, there's no way you would have seen it.
Right. So, I mean,
the honest with GitHub, right, for the icon file that had the payload in it.
So these kind of things are this is back to the very first thing we talked about tonight, which was you need to have a plan because eventually you're going to get got. And it's not even necessarily going to be because you were lazy or because it was your fault. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I downloaded a patch. I tested it. It looked okay. I pushed it with a GPO. I didn't let users install this at home. It pushed automatically when they logged in, and I still got screwed. So, I mean, at some point, you just need to face the fact that you're gonna get got.
The innovation that I'm pushing for is that we can detect this before it goes from bad to worse. And I don't think that is widely accessible today, but I am hopeful that we can analyze software in the supply chain, and my goal is that it catches it earlier.
Yeah.
Right. And that's hard.
Right.
I mean, it
is hard.
Super hard. I mean, it's something that Dave talked about on the Daily Dave this week too, is that being proactive is super hard. And even though we're saying we're being proactive, we're really not. Really, most of our defense is too late.
Well, and I mean, you try to be proactive and you write all these policies about being proactive. And then the next thing you know, somebody calls down there and you say, today's our patch testing day. And they go, drop all that. Mm-hmm. We've got this. We need to fix this other problem. And then, it just gets pushed. And the next thing you know, all this proactive stuff is pushed to the back and you're getting those do more with less, work smarter, not harder stings. And we're cutting the budget and you got fewer people. And it's like, I really don't even have time. And the story I always tell, when I first was at university and I was a sysop, and I walked in and there was a stack of green bar about as high as my waist, and they said every day you need to review these logs and sign off on them that they're okay. And I was like, what? How the hell am I going to do that? And they were like, oh, you don't do anything. Just sign the top sheet and move on.
I want to talk about something really cool as we're getting near the end here, but I want to make sure I talk about my story number 5. Because this is really cool. Because if you're a bug bounty hunter, pen tester, working in now attack surface management, you've got the problem of I scan everything that's externally facing, and I scrape that. And if it's a web service, I pull down all the images. I screenshot it, right? I screenshot the website. And what's interesting is, I mean, I remember talking to this on the show years and years and years ago, even when just some of the first open source projects were supporting this kind of screenshotting feature. I think I was at Tenable at the time, and I was pushing us to do this. I was pushing our dev team. It'd be really cool, like if we found a web page and we took a screenshot of it. And they're like, well, I'm like, no, that's really cool, because a human can look at a screenshot and go, that's interesting or that's not interesting. But fast forward to today, you end up with a lot of screenshots because there's a lot of stuff out there, and you have to make it scale. Let's say you are doing attack surface monitoring and you're scanning huge swaths of IP address space for people, get a lot of screenshots. How do you reduce those screenshots and make sense of this data? With a bunch of if statements or machine learning. But what I love about this post is they talk about 2011 blog post from Neil Krawitz. Neil Krawitz is long known. Larry is one that really is the big Neil fan, and so am I, because we've talked about his blog, the Hacker Factor blog, so many times in the past. And specifically, Neil is really super interested in digital image format kind of research, both for privacy, security, and just really interesting things. So it turns out the solution essentially to this problem goes back to a blog post that Neil put out in 2011 and said that a detailed explanation of some of the numerous variations on perceptual hashing, but will mostly look the same if you squint. In other words, how do you take 2,000 images and go, well, which one of these is not like the other, and group them into similar things? Turns out the answer is you downsize the image input to a fixed size, ignoring aspect ratio, convert the image to grayscale, convert the image to pixel data into frequency domain by using discrete cosine or wavelet transform. I don't know what that means, but it sounds really cool. Apply a low-pass filter, throwing out high frequencies, summarize the remaining values to some property of the remaining values, like a median, to produce a fixed size bit string. Essentially, that's the recipe to an algorithm that goes, these 300 images are very similar or likely the same image. They might be different aspect ratio, different format, different DPI or whatever, but if you apply this algorithm, so essentially what this means is if you've got a system that's scouring an IP range, taking screenshots of every website, it means a 75 times reduction in the number of images a red team needs to review. I thought it was pretty cool.
That is cool.
I'd never thought of it like that. And they talk about some of the open source tools which have been evolving and changing over time for doing. Because when I was doing pen testing, one of the tail end of my full-time kind of pen testing, one of the things I would do was I would scan and crawl, scour, screenshot everything, and bring the screenshots down to a system where I could review it. Aquatone and Eyewitness. I want to say Eyewitness might have been one of the last tools that I looked at for doing this. Yeah. But because you would find, like, hey, look, that's a Cisco router, or that's a IP phone, or that's something weird. And I know that. I mean, I could scan and enumerate and all that stuff, but if you just take a screenshot of what the externally facing web server is, like, I recognize that. That's that kind of login. That's where I want to start my bug bounty hunt or my pen test. Mm-hmm. So, pretty cool research, I thought. The other one was a comparison of ExploitDB and zeroday.today. You guys using zeroday.today?
I have not.
That was a new to me. Now, zeroday.today, are they selling exploits? It looks like they have payment methods and stuff. Are they zero-day brokers?
Private stuff in there. They have some private stuff. I don't know if it's a zero-day brokerage, but you can get subscriptions to additional feeds and maybe prior to disclosure, or just after patch vulnerabilities or code.
And so, I mean, the way I looked at this was like, in short, use both. There was a rumor that ExploitDB was going away? They didn't produce an update for a while. What was going on with that?
I seen that, and I've never seen anything past that, and I've never seen it go down. So I don't know how actively that one's updated still.
I think
I usually use zeroday.today for most of my stuff. So
okay, yeah, I added that one pretty recently, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, they're very similar as far as number of exploits and postings. I've not seen a big discrepancy between the two.
Oh no, there's a discrepancy. So my story number 14. They have a chart, unique exploits. So unique CVEs only in ExploitDB is 19,000 something. Only in zeroday.today is 1,979. And in both is 4,000 something.
Oh, wow.
But,
okay.
Again, ExploitDB may have like really old exploits or cross-site scripting stuff and really esoteric. I mean, I have experience in counting CVEs and recognizing their importance and coverage and things like that. So take that with a grain of salt. Again, my analysis of this is use both. I mean, they're both out there. Although I haven't done the paid subscription. Is there a subscription to zeroday.today? I think they contacted me.
I haven't used it like that.
I got you. They contacted me on Twitter too, which was really weird because we hadn't done the show yet, and I had flagged this article, and they contacted me on Twitter. And they do have a Twitter account, which is like Elite Speak Injector, but INJ3CT0R. So follow them on Twitter. And it's a great resource for exploit. Tyler, you're attesting to this great resource for exploits.
Yeah, they have a lot of exploits.
Sweet. Lee, any stories you want to hit?
Use whatever tool will help.
Absolutely. Lee, any stories you wanted to hit of yours?
Well, so you got the one I really wanted to mention. The interesting one, my number 4, just at a high level, this Chinese Pinduoduo shopping app. Apparently, they're going and taking advantage of weaknesses in Androids and gathering all kinds of stuff about their users, making it on the creepy side. But given that they're China, and in China, probably not a lot's going to change about that. I was just wondering, they can't be the only one that's figured out how to do this. Creepy.
But I mean, that's standard Chinese, approach is that these apps are all,
right,
going to be managed, and we're going to be able to get into them and pull data down. And I mean, there's not much you can do
right
about it in China.
Right. But the one, my number 3 above it, I thought was something a little more interesting about Android is that, in the Android ecosystem, there can be a delay between when a patch comes out and when it's available for your particular device. And it looks like threat actors are taking advantage of that delay. Maybe it's fixed in the pixels, but your Galaxy Edge is still vulnerable because they haven't pushed the update out, or insert your value. I'm not picking on Samsung here. There's a delay, and I'm wondering if the device manufacturers, I'm picking on Android because it's a larger gap. iOS, there's one provider, will tighten up their processing at all. I mean, I've seen a couple of months delay sometimes to get the latest upgrade on the Android OS. It's annoying. I worry about that because we got a lot of Androids out there, and the average user, whether it's Android or iOS, I think they're equally tech savvy. We're not in that lower tech savvy. We're at a different security point. But I think of, what is my mom or my grandma or whatever going to be thinking about security on iOS or an Android device? Let alone, are they going to click the update?
Yeah, even if it is updated, they don't click it. And certainly I get updates because I run a Pixel, but it's unfortunately a smaller percentage of the market. Like,
yeah,
I was in Target this morning, entire aisle of phone cases, right? And it goes back to like iPhone 8, and they have signs for like each section. This is iPhone 8 or whatever, or 11, and then it goes up like, I don't know, 10 to 11, 12, whatever, all the way up to 14. This entire wall is all iPhone. I'm like, what if I wanted to buy a new case for my Pixel 7? You don't carry that? No. Okay. I'll order it online. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't like you. No,
it's terrible. It's terrible.
And I think
North America has a fascination with the iPhone, but that doesn't mean the Android's invalid. It means,
I know that the companies have an incentive not to help people with older phones and smaller used phones because they want you to buy a new phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I think the Pixel should have more market share in the U.S. and Google's certainly trying. I mean, they're doing some advertising, a lot of advertising for it, but it's just not seeing adoption. And I really think the driving factor behind that is, and it's not even the younger population. It's if it's not an iMessage, it shows up as a different color and you're shunned. I really, truly think that's the driver behind that. That's the driver behind that. I'm like, that's
so weird.
I love my Pixel, dude. You got a Pixel 7, Tyler?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think we were comparing at ShmooCon. I think we determined that mine was bigger than yours. Is what we determined. Our phones.
So.
I'm talking about our phones.
Yeah.
Mine just
I actually was. I was in some conversation where some guy was getting shunned because he had a group of his golfing buddies, but he wouldn't let him add any of his non-iOS users to the group because then they wouldn't be blue messages.
Correct.
And it locked down the iMessage group because when you have a non-iOS member, you can't edit it anymore.
Right.
And it's like, damn.
Yeah, they do, but they're all wrong because they should be using Signal. What the hell, man? I had no problems with Signal.
No.
And
don't use iMessage.
It's not blue or green. It's all freaking white.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, big deal.
Oh
right?
boy. I like the Rorschach ransomware just because I like saying the word Rorschach, and that's it's like psychiatry thing where they show you the ink blot, right?
Yeah, the ink blot.
It's also one of the characters in Watchmen.
Yes.
But it's Checkpoint says it's the fastest ransomware encryptor out there, but it's not encrypting the entire file. So of course it takes less time. But you know what? I don't care how much it encrypts. It's still a pain in the ass.
Still, yeah.
Yep. Even if it only grabs half the file, you still encrypt it, and it's not going to read, so it's corrupted.
Yeah,
at that point.
you're screwed.
Yep.
But
that's most that's most good ransomware, I'd say, in the last 3 years. Almost nothing encrypts the entire file. It's either doing headers or start binaries.
Way too slow.
Yeah, using an encryption scheme blended to just get a certain portion of the files. This one is actually pretty sophisticated from the encryption scheme they're using and the way they're doing it. The code's pretty straightforward, and the algorithms are solid. So it is almost twice as fast as the next fastest one. So it's scary when speed is of the essence. Something like Lockbit, where they can encrypt a terabyte of data in less than a day. Once they've gained persistence, exfilled your stuff, and the encryption starts, like, you've only got so much time to do that. But the amount of data that they can encrypt also determines how much they're going to ransom you for and the impact they can have. So they spend a lot of time on enhancing and optimizing the code for this.
Oh, last story, because I feel it's important to talk about, was my story number 16.
Okay.
This is like a movie. Ukraine's secret plan to convince 3 Russian pilots to defect with their planes. And that's something that my description didn't necessarily articulate at all, was not only were they trying to, I mean, this is a tactic that goes back, centuries. They're trying to convert defectors from Russia to Ukraine in this example. But they weren't just trying to flip the people. It sounded like they were trying to convince them, like, you should flip, come to our side. And they basically said, we'll give you $1 million a piece, which is more money than any of them stand to see in a lifetime, right? Being a fighter pilot in Russia, from what the article says. And then, but also they were like, just come land your planes in Ukraine, and like, you can come here, we'll give you $1 million each. You can go walk off into the sunset, just leave your planes here, we'll take care of them. I thought that was awesome. I mean, it didn't work out. I mean, it still had some advantages for Ukraine, but it didn't. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. I mean, if it did work out, we wouldn't be talking about it, right? I guess.
And I'm a little worried about those pilots now. If FSB got involved, some people are in Lublanka right now.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a problem for them. But I'm really interested in what was their plan after they got the planes. Was this a kamikaze, like, let's go to the Kremlin and like drop some bombs with flights that are going to get over the airspace, or are they going to reverse engineer the encryption for the radios? Like, what was the plan after?
Yeah, what was the plan? There had to be a lot of, I mean, a lot of planning went into this. A lot of planning was during this. But Tyler, to your point, what was the plan after? Like, first of all, what's your plan to hide these 3 people? Because you got to hide them really well. Right?
I don't think there was a plan for that. I think it was like, you'll get your $1 million tomorrow. Yeah. Just wait over there at the bar. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
You'll be okay.
The 3 of them wake up in the Russian border somewhere. With a big sign like, these are your defectors. We got your planes.
And we stole their kidneys.
Yeah. Exactly.
Why not?
I think from Ukraine's standpoint, if they were doing the ops right, they would put a high level of fidelity and make an example of, hey, these guys did defect. We did pay them, and they are safe. So
that's true.
More defectors, just like ransomware.
That would be a better op. Yeah.
I mean, even still, Ukraine tried to use this to their advantage to go, hey, we almost did this. I mean, even that in and of itself.
Now they've got witch hunts, and they're instilling fear in FSB going around and always check on all the pilots and all the tank drivers, all the things.
Right.
The pilots are going to be jumpy as all hell, and they're not going to be super as effective. And by the way, on the Ukrainian side, they could have gotten 3 state-of-the-art planes for under $3 million. I mean,
but also on the but hold on. Also on the Russian side, if I'm a Russian pilot, I'm like, wait a minute. You mean I can get $1 million? Like, hold on. Can I take that deal? Can I take that deal? I'll take that deal.
I was kind of like, could I get a Russian MiG for $1 million?
Yeah.
We maybe should put our money together and order one. Like, we'd call Ukraine and say, you keep one for us. I'll come fly it home.
And we'll just like exchange weeks. Yeah.
I mean, I think we could all take turns. And I mean, you could get, how fast could we get to Idaho in a MiG? I mean, like an hour? I mean, I could pop out there and, like, it's Tyler's weekend. I'm going to afterburner all the way to Idaho and just drop this puppy off.
What's your fuel bill going to be?
Let's buzz Gowan Field, see who responds. That's where the Idaho Air National Guard hangs out.
Like Isn't this how timeshare started? We could just have a timeshare
timeshare.
day on.
It's a MiG timeshare. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, I wouldn't mind flying a MiG. That'd be pretty fun, right? You take it out over the ocean and do some supersonic passes, and
then we could get an F-18. We could totally simulate Top Gun.
We could play our club needs to have several planes. Yeah. I want an F-35.
Talk to me, Goose. Talk to me, Goose.
Zelensky, let's make this work, buddy. We'll help you help us.
Yeah,
that's right.
I mean, it's a good gutsy counter intel move.
It is. Those guys are masters. There was no losing,
right? Like they didn't have anything to lose. They can use propaganda. If they didn't do it, they could have planes for $3 million.
Best ops, right? I mean, they're like they don't risk any personnel. It's just like something you try. Worst case, it fails. They don't get the plane, but now they've sowed all kinds of distrust and worry. It's like a textbook example of a really good psyops, even if you don't get the planes. And if you get the planes, it's just bonus gravy.
Right. Back to Tyler's point, though. What do you do with the planes once you have them?
You fly those babies. Have some fun.
Yeah, I really hope they planned on like nuclear arming, like a dirty bomb on one of those and just crashing it right into Kremlin.
You know, you'll see pictures of some farmer towing away a MiG with a tractor.
Yeah.
This thing is worth $1 million, yo.
Now I will. So I do have a story about that. This was right after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and Poland had announced they were no longer part of the Soviet Union, and I was in Poland, and we were driving through the countryside, and we saw a Russian attack helicopter sitting in a field. And this guy was plowing the field.
I swear you're like Wolverine, and there's like cut shots of you.
No, but there was
at various points in history going back 300 years.
And we talked to this farmer, and I was like, "How did this get here?" And he was like, "Well, if you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you." He said the Russians were leaving, and they ran out of fuel, and they just landed and started walking toward Moscow. And
what was it?
Then he spit on the ground. It was a Russian attack helicopter.
Ooh,
fully armed.
Sweet.
And it was just sitting there in a field, and this guy was plowing the field, like, around it, and he was like, "Yes, if you want it, I'll sell it to you." I was like, damn.
How much do you want for it?
I don't know. I didn't really have a lot of cash, and that could go in our club, though. We have a Russian attack helicopter fully armed, and it'd take a while to get that to Idaho, but
yeah.
But we could go pick Tyler. We could go pick them up with the MiG and fly them back. We just need a 2-seat MiG.
Works for me.
All right, it's after 9.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. We'll see you next time. Over and out.